With draft day closing in on us, I decided to make a video talking about one of the key pieces the Montreal Canadiens needs to move to make this draft day probably one of the most successful ones they've had in a very long time. And that key move that they need to do is they need to move Max Pacioretty, their captain. Now, this move may seem controversial, and a lot of Habs fans might not agree with me. A lot of Habs fans might agree with me, but it's come to the point where the Montreal Canadiens have a roster that is not good enough to compete for a playoff spot, let alone a Stanley Cup. And they are in position at the third overall pick to be able to draft a really good goal scorer to help them get some offense and get their foot in the right direction to maybe making the playoffs. Now, the Montreal Canadiens have always been a team that have rushed prospects because they haven't really had a good enough system, and they've relied heavily on Carey Price in past seasons. This season, though, coming up, I have a feeling that they have the chance to make the playoffs if they can make some key moves. And one of those big key moves is trading a guy like Max Pacioretty at the deadline, acquiring another first-round pick for this year's draft, whether it be late or mid, it doesn't really matter, and a prospect on the brink of ready to make a difference for an NHL team. Now, I'm talking about a guy who is past first-round pick or a player that has performed very well in the AHL and one of the top prospects. I think Max Pacioretty, although has had a couple off seasons in Montreal, is a very elite player in the NHL that he deserves a chance somewhere else. Now, I think Max Pacioretty, on the other hand, he doesn't know if he wants to leave or if he wants to stay. It's a personal dilemma with him. He's the captain of Montreal Canadiens. He's not the face of the franchise. You can't be the face of a franchise when you have a guy like Carey Price in front of you, in the gold net. But I feel like it's come to a point where they need to move him, and I think there are a couple teams that are going to be really looking at him, and I'm pretty sure there were a lot of teams that were looking at him at the trade deadline. They'll be looking at him again at the draft day. Those teams in particular that I'm thinking, as crazy it sounds, a team like Anaheim, who might think that sacrificing a first-round pick, a mid-first-round pick, would be a good option for them in regards to trying to get this core one last shot at a cup. I know that's very unlikely to win, but a lot of teams think that way. And another team I'm thinking of in the same situation is Minnesota. Those two teams right there are two very aging teams with an aging roster who are kind of, this is their upcoming season, is their last real season with this core to compete for any deep playoff run. And I feel that they're willing to sacrifice small pieces for the future to make this team, this core they have now, a better opportunity to win or go far. And I think that the most likely option would be Minnesota because they have a little bit more cap, and they also are looking to move some of their blue line, and that's really what Montreal needs. Montreal is a very, very stale blue line. A lot of stay-at-home defensemen, not a lot of firepower up there for their blue line ever since losing PK Subban. So getting a guy on their blue line to help them would be a big add. Now, if I'm Minnesota, I'm looking to probably trade a guy like Jonas Brodin, top four. He is a very good player, but I think getting Jonas Brodin and maybe like a first-round pick from Max Pacioretty and possibly throwing in a guy like maybe Paul Byron, that would be a good option for them. That would be a really good trade for Montreal if they were able to make a trade like that. But the real question that comes down to is that whether or not Montreal sees it as a good idea for them to trade. Now, if Montreal, is a very weird team. They could, show up in this offseason and they could make an honest-to-God hard push and they could sign John Tavares. If they sign John Tavares this offseason, and they get the third overall pick, and that third overall pick they think is ready enough to play in the NHL, they have a legit chance of making the playoffs again. Now, my reason for that is that you have a Carey Price who has possibly going to have a bounce-back year, a healthy Shea Weber. You'll have Max Pacioretty with Alex Galchenyuk, John Tavares on their first line. That's a pretty good first line if you have to ask me. But the big problem with that is that if you look at their bottom six and even their top six, really at this moment, even with John Tavares getting onto that roster, they lack the pieces to make a playoff run. If you look at some of these teams now if you look at all the four teams that made the respected conference finals in the West, Winnipeg and Vegas, and the East, you have Washington with Tampa Bay. If you look at their four lines, what they roll out is hard checking lines that are young, youthful, and has so much speed and talent that they can score goals and hit. That's what you need nowadays in the NHL. You need all four lines not to only be just, each role to be a first line being a scoring line, second puck possession and scoring, third and fourth line wearing them down, wearing down the physical players, getting physical game, hitting, forechecking, all that stuff. That's not what the game is as much anymore as it is a more speed-based game. Speed rules the NHL right now, and that is what Montreal lacks. They don't have that speed to compete for a deep playoff run. That is where they need to implement youth. Whether or not that youth be in a trade, bringing up prospects that they believe are ready to play those bottom six roles efficiently with speed, or whatever the situation may be. It requires them to have speed, and Montreal does not have speed right now at this moment, and that is what their biggest issue is. As you look at their team as a whole, they have a lot of good pieces, but not a lot of speed. If you have to right now, if you were to ask me, as someone who follows Montreal Canadiens a little bit because my father is a really big Montreal fan, if you had to ask me their two fastest players were, I would honestly tell you that it would be Alex Galchenyuk, and probably, if I had to pick, maybe a guy like Brendan Gallagher. And they're not very fast as in. Brendan Gallagher is a great player, but that's another problem. You got guys like Brendan Gallagher mixed in your forward core that aren't going to produce as much because they don't have a lot of high-end talent around them. And that's what they need. They need guys that can score 15 goals, 20 goals even. They need to have more scoring options than if they want to be a successful team. That is the big thing right now that they need. They need to be able to successfully make an option, to have an option, I should say, better to say, of scoring than having to rely on their first line, because Alex Galchenyuk isn't cutting it in scoring, neither is Brendan Gallagher, and neither is Max Pacioretty. They need goal scoring. Losing PK Subban was a big problem for this, last season because of goal scoring. He brought offense to the blue power play, to the blue line, to your regular 5-on-5 hockey. PK Subban brings a lot of offense to your team. They lost that offense. That is why I always thought from the get-go that was a stupid trade to make. Not because of age or cap, because of offense. Shea Weber will not bring you the same type of offensive production that PK Subban will. And that is why they didn't make the playoffs this year. Offense is what wins you games. Everyone can always say that defense is important, and defense is very, very important. But if you can't score a goal and you have that fantastic defense, you're not going to win a game. Maybe you'll get points in overtime, but that's still not going to be able to get you to the playoffs enough. You need offense to win, and you need defense to maintain the win. So that is the big balancing issue right now that Montreal has. They do not have the offense to get them to win, and right now they always play from behind with good defense, usually, having options like that. But even if you look at their defense, it's gotten worse over the last year, They've lost so many guys, and Carl Alzner has been nothing but a brick wall out there. He just stands there, pylon. He doesn't put up any offensive numbers. He just hits, and he's getting paid I don't even know how much money. If I'm not mistaken, it's like 4.7 or 5 mil a season, something along the regards of that. And I wanted the Jets to sign Carl Alzner last offseason. Dmitry Kulikov was a way better pickup than what Carl Alzner was, and he didn't even play in the playoffs the last game where they got eliminated by Vegas. That tells you how much of a difference a cap situation can be, and that is why they need to be able to. Montreal needs to be able to look at their roster, find the holes that include speed and scoring and offensive defense, and make those moves at the deadline by trading Max Pacioretty to teams to acquire players like Jonas Brodin to make their roster better for next season. Do I actually think that they'll be able to get a good haul for Max Pacioretty? It's hard to say. I think they're going to have to pick and choose whether or not they're going to want a prospect and a ready player, or a pick and a ready player. And what I mean by ready player is that I mean a player that is a prospect or an already established NHL player. And what I mean by prospect is that he's ready to make the jump. Like, he is projected to make the NHL next season. That is what I mean by a ready player. Either he's a ready basically what I'm trying to say is that they need a roster player, a key roster player, and a prospect or a first round pick that either the prospect can make an impact this season, or a pick that'll be in a good enough position for them to get a player that will help them, say, 2 years from now. And that is still not that long away. Especially if they can make some moves to develop what they have already. And it really starts with developing what they already have. They need to be able to teach these guys to play a speed-based game, and that's what they really are lacking. Speed is a big thing in the NHL, and Montreal does not have that speed option that a lot of other teams have, especially in the East. East is a very fast conference, especially when you have the Leafs in the same division as you. The Leafs are a very fast team. Now, Montreal has a lot of things to fix, and this video isn't talking about the holes in Montreal. It's talking about where Max Pacioretty will go. Now, if I had to pick my 3 places I think Max Pacioretty will end up, the number 1 place I honestly think he'll end up would be Minnesota in the West. They're a team they realize that they have 1 good year left of Zach Parise if he's healthy, and they have 1 good year of Ryan Suter left at max, because Ryan Suter already had this injury, and who knows if he can recover. It's Ryan Suter, but they need to be able to push these guys with extra help if they want to be able to do anything. And as a Jets fan, I watched that first round, a lot. And other than that one game where they won that 6-1 or whatever it was, they were just outplayed by speed, and they need speed. Now, Max Pacioretty isn't going to bring you a lot of speed, but it's more goal scoring options and a lot of puck possession, especially since a team like Minnesota plays a really, neutral ice turnover type hockey, very slow based, trap type system. Now, the second team I think he's going to go to would be Anaheim. Really self-exclaimed there. Same situation as Montreal. Need more offense. Injuries last year plagued them until the last really half of the season when they really got to start healthy. And they ended up getting shit kicked because they had no offense by San Jose. Enough said right there. The third team I think, now this one, I'm going out on a limb by saying this. The third team I think he could end up on would be a team in the East, and I don't think anyone's really talking about it, and that's why I pick it, because I like to pick at least one team that would be an underdog, and I think, honestly, that team is the Philadelphia Flyers. Think about it. Add Max Pacioretty to their top 6. They have enough bottom 6 pieces to give up, and probably a first-rounder that they are willing to pass up. Give them that. That is a team that I would be scared about. That is a team that I could see going to the Eastern Conference Final. Now, people can look at me like, what are you talking about? They lost in the first round. Yeah, they lost in the first round. They have a good goaltending prospect coming up that can actually stop, pucks, unlike, what they currently have now is Swiss cheese in net. And I think adding Max Pacioretty to that top 6 would be so deadly that they could beat Pittsburgh in the first round, especially if this whole Phil Kessel thing falls out and it becomes true and he gets traded. But those are the 3 teams I think he'll end up to. Minnesota, Anaheim, and the Philadelphia Flyers. Those are the 3 teams I think he'll end up on. This is just my predictions, guys. I could be completely wrong. He might not even get traded. He might, stay there for the rest of his career. We never know. But I just feel that this is a key guy that Montreal needs to move if they want success, because he can get a return for him, and they can actually, replace his position on the team. Shea Weber can become a captain. There's a good leadership there. So if you think about it, they have a bunch of pieces to replace Pacioretty. They just need a couple more little pieces to push them into the playoffs again, and that's what they need. This will be a very, very crucial thing for them to do if they want to speed their rebuild up. If they want to keep it long rebuild, keep Pacioretty. If you want to speed it up, which they're looking like they're going to do, especially since they have the third, trade Pacioretty. Pacioretty will get traded at the deadline, mark my words, and I'm pretty sure he's going to go to Minnesota. That's my prediction. Thanks, guys, so much for watching. I'm going to make a couple more videos. If you guys are new to the channel, I just talk about all things hockey, speculation videos, trade videos, game day reviews, series reviews, all this other stuff, anything that's interesting in the hockey world or that interests me in the hockey world, I talk about. So if you guys like that idea, that concept of the channel, make sure to subscribe, like the video, and comment if you're a Montreal fan where you'd like Max Pacioretty to go, what you'd like for him as a return, and if you want him to stay in general. Thanks so much for watching, guys. Peace out, take care, and I'll see you in